Genshin Impact's Fontaine arc is undoubtedly the best story arc that the game has had. So, while we're currently on a high, let's talk about how disappointed we are. This is the top 5 most disappointing plot points in Genshin's history. What counts for this are plot threads that ended up being disappointing. So if something is already super fillery, like Dory's whole godforsaken existence, then I'm not going to mention it here. So the plots here needed to have started out really well, but then absolutely fumbled the bag. Like number 5, Child's betrayal. How many quotes can I fit on the screen right now? Child is introduced in the Leeway arc of the story, and he ends up being the first human antagonist of an arc. Yes, we see Signora and Mondstadt, but we don't fight her, and she's not a final boss or anything. She's there to set up the Fatui. Child, on the other hand, starts as a friend, helping us when we're suspects in the case of a god's death. It's a cool idea after we just met the Ice Queen herself, so it's a pretty huge letdown that, we barely get to know him at all. And I don't think I'd care about this if it wasn't viewed as a twist that he was the villain all along. The only way this twist actually works is if A, you let us know who he is and he seems really genuine and forthright, then he's the villain, or B, Signora isn't evil at first, and then Child turns out to be, because then we would expect the Fatui to not be evil. Obviously, we couldn't do B, so it's weird that a variation of A wasn't done. There's literally nobody else in that entire arc that it makes sense to be evil. So when it's revealed that Child is, the guy who's a part of the organization that has the mistress who ball gag Venti, it's less than a shock. It's more like how stupid did you think I was this whole time? So while I don't think it's the most disappointing thing ever, it's still a plot that's fumbled to me because we really could have been made to care that we're fighting Child instead of just feeling like it was an inevitability. Also, Child gets a lot more in the game's future, so it's even more disappointing that he wasn't given more at this point in the story. But not as disappointing as number 4, Kale. Her whole character. Don't get me wrong, Kale starts out really fantastically. She's the first character we see from Sumeru in that badass Fatui trailer, and she's the first playable character we meet in Sumeru itself. She's shy, reserved, and a breath of fresh air from all the outgoing characters that we had met up until this point. What goes wrong is, everything else. It's explained that Kale is connected to Dottore based on the horrendous things that he did to her in her past. This is very, very explicitly placed here to show you how horrendous Dottore can be, but also the resolve of Kale. Dottore is also used in the later portion of Sumeru, and it's also clearly why this part exists. So, explain to me why Kale has no dealings or thoughts about Dottore's appearance later in the plot. Kale isn't only wasted potential because of this, but she's also wasted with regards to her diagnosis of Elazar. She's clearly used in the beginning of Sumeru to teach us what Elazar even is. So obviously this diagnosis will end up becoming important later, right? At the end of the story, Kale gets cured of Elazar, and that's that. Nothing else. Didn't seem to impact her that much. But really, to have such a triumphant story related to her past, we really get none of it in the present. She's essentially the lore book equivalent of a character. She has a past, no present, and she's just used to exposit what certain things are in Sumeru. She's good in events later, but her main story usage is god-awful. Speaking of books, it's clear why she's here, because of the manga attached to Genshin. I haven't read it, but I know Kale is a large part of it, and how Dottore treats her is central as well. So let's talk about him too. Dottore's erasure. Dottore is an enigma of a character. He's someone who we hear about from other characters first, and he sounds like an absolute monster, which is really, really great. Besides Signora, we really haven't had a big evil character. The Abyss is a void of personality, and each Fatui member so far has had hints of grayness, or they just get redeemed altogether. But Dottore just seems like a terrible dude. When he's introduced to us as someone who has tortured another character, I was taken aback. I was like, wow, this is actually really brave. This seems like a character that they're gonna have a real hard time redeeming. The reason I knew he was eventually gonna get redeemed is it doesn't seem like Hoyoverse wants us to be able to have actual villains in our party. And so the ones who start out as villains or antagonists always get some form of redemption. So this was the first true villain of Genshin to me. So what did they do? Well, They erased his ass. Turns out, plot twist, Dottore is actually multiple versions of himself, all at different points of life. So some of them are calm and collected, albeit crazy, while others are actual monsters. When this was explained, I was like, oh, so we're not gonna get the crazy ones, just the one who ends up being misunderstood or something. That means we're definitely gonna get some interesting interactions and drama between Dottore and his other versions, right? I mean, this would be the obvious direction to go in, as this is actually a great idea, especially for a redemption arc. Maybe Dottore could even go against himself. So we're gonna do that, right? Right, they all get erased, all of them, except one. They're gone. That's right, Genshin used Dottore clones as a simple excuse to get rid of the more evil ones and just keep one.
What a ridiculous decision! You can't be serious!
How could I have been so short-sighted?
You think this is the end? Wait, I'll have my
I'm over here stroking my dick. I got lotion on my dick.
I legit was left in awe at how terrible of a decision that this is. This is also really awful for Kale's character too, as this means we'll never get an interaction between Kale and the one who wronged her. Instead, maybe if we're lucky and the writers are in a good mood, we'll get a scene where Kale gets mad at Dottore for making the version of him that did that to her. It's very clear based on this point and Kale that Genshin just wanted to get rid of the manga as quickly as possible because Genshin writers absolutely despise character drama. So they came up with a great idea and in the exact same arc absolutely ruined it. It's the most shocking dropped idea I've ever seen in Genshin because his clones had such great potential for the future, but not as bad as all of Inazuma. This seems like a cop-out and yeah. Anyway, Inazuma has the most intriguing start to any arc, in my opinion. From before we even step foot in the region, the game expertly weaves into conversations the stifling nature of the country. A country separated from the world, full of samurai and a god who rules over all with an iron fist. A country punishing those who step out of line, at war with a legendary faction who dares face the might of a god. But first we gotta get a permit before we can leave the first island. From the first moments, Inazuma was a letdown. From the permit nonsense to the overly long quest to get Ayaka's approval to Ayaka not really mattering at all, to the resistance being the biggest pointless and dropped plot in gaming history, to Tepe showing up and then dying, to Raiden and her battle. I tried to just pick one of these and it was probably gonna be Swordfish 2, but I really just have to put the whole arc here. I need to do a whole arc breakdown to really piece together why this turd is so messy, but in the meantime, just remember that it's by far the messiest plot the game has had so far, and it's most certainly the most disappointing. But I've got to put something else at number one. Dunyazard needed to die. Look, if you forgot this character existed, I don't fault you, because after she was revived, she's kind of just let loose to wander the Genshin wilderness and never come back. But me being me, I keep thinking about what a huge letdown her plot really ended up being, compared to what it could have been. Dunyazard, like Kale, is a character that is introduced as someone who has Elazar. She's someone who's sneaking out of her house to help run a festival. Dunyazard is a super stan of the Lesser Lord Kusanali, Nahida, because Nahida has spoken to her in her dreams and allowed her to see the outside world in them. She's one of Nahida's only fans, basically, as everyone else is still obsessed with the god that was before her. So Dunyazard is introduced to us as someone full of life, seemingly at the end of it. So when the festival starts, we get stuck in a damn time loop. Long story. It's a really interesting, well thought out story that involves Dunyazard slowly fading because she's dying from Elazar because they're all trapped. This is also the same quest where we actually meet Nahida for the first time. Nahida, a character whose arc is supposed to be about finding her true strength in a time of weakness and being who she's truly supposed to be regardless of those who keep her down. So with these two characters we get stuck in a time loop that is at a festival that Dunyazard had a hand in crafting, one to honor Nahida's birthday, who's now there and seemingly powerless. But because of this time loop, Dunyazard isn't able to see the festival's end, a dance that she's always wanted to see her whole life. So the time loop continues, and Dunyazard is in her last moments. So she begins to pass away. All Nahida is able to do for her is reach her soul and hear her final request, a request to see that final dance of the festival as a final praise of the god that let her actually live. So Nahida uses what power she has here and allows Dunyazard to see that final dance before she passes away. And then it turns out Nahida actually saved Dunyazard. She's not dead, and then she gets cured of Elazar. Woo! I can't express how somber and beautiful this cutscene was when I thought it was Dunyazard's death. This would, quite literally, be the best character moment in the game's history, bar none. It would make Dunyazard into this tragic character, but it would also have done so much for Nahida as well. It would have shown Nahida that there are some obstacles that simply can't be overcome, but like Dunyazard, she needs to just keep pushing forward anyway. And using the memory of Dunyazard, she can get out of the shackles of her own prison. Like Dunyazard was able to get out of the shackles of her suffocating home with the help of Nahida. Nahida then, when she breaks out of the prison and comes to her godly powers, would actually feel like she had an arc in the story, as she couldn't save Dunyazard here, even though she still was able to meet her soul and hear her final request, which honestly should be overpowered enough. Instead, after this quest, not only do we basically just drop Dunyazard altogether, we also just see Nahida as this ultimate power fantasy character who can basically do almost whatever she wants, which makes her arc of feeling she's not enough feel really silly. She never has to earn her powers. She just is really powerful, which is a really boring direction for her character to go in. This isn't even to say what this does for the danger of Elazar as well. Like with Kale, every character that we meet that has Elazar ends up being fine, so we never get to see the danger of the disease in real time. Like with almost everything else from Hoyoverse up to this point, we just see that the disease has been awful in the past. Okay, so show us that now. This also isn't like Hoyoverse hasn't killed characters off before in the past. While I think Signora will be revived, we did actually get Tepe to die. Even though it didn't really hit because we barely knew him and it certainly seemed like a cynical death to move the plot forward, Dunyazard's death, though, would have actually done so much more, and it really is the most disappointing plot point in all of Genshin because of how great it really would have been, and all they needed to do was just follow through at the last moments. And these are the last moments of this video. Let me know what your most disappointing plot points in the game have been, and if you like this format, let me know what future lists you would like to see. Regardless, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Wait, no, I'm back.